Not support this bill.
That's right.
Speaker.
I call the honourable member John Hayes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Clearly that last speech was not delivered by anybody who could have been elected to this chamber by the people of New Zealand. Absolutely impossible. I've never heard such a long string of meaningless cliches that meant nothing in my life. And when you think about it, I can understand also why the people I understand also why the people down in the South Island got rid of that member that was speaking before, Clayton Cosgrove, and moved him from electorate category to list member of Parliament, because what he had to say was absolutely meaningless in the context of the job of a member of Parliament, which lasts for much longer than 1 hour in a select committee where Mr Cosgrove or myself or another member in the committee might get some questions to ask. This is a very much more comprehensive package of opportunities for members of Parliament to do their job, to read their papers, to ask the questions, to release press statements. There are all sorts of ways of keeping the government in a position to account, and Clayton Cosgrove, as was the last speaker, Andrew Williams, were both way off beam. Mr Speaker, I would like to, for the benefit of these members of Parliament that don't have a sense of history or understanding of our public sector, like to just go back to the end of the Second World War. And what we saw happen as a feature of all OECD economies after the Second World War was that the public sector grew from about 25% to about 45% of GDP. Now, when we talk about, and we wring our hands across the side of the House and say, oh, but all these services are being cut, actually they're paid for by taxpayers with money coming out of their pocket. And we are now in a situation here in New Zealand where our public service consumes about 39% of GDP. That money comes from people's pockets, and it is too much. Now, we have not tried to improve, or not in any way tried to decrease the amount of money going out in welfare payments. What our reforms are about is improving the efficiency of the public sector, and I see my colleague Mr Ryle sitting in front here, and I would say to him and to this House that the health sector is the standout example of achievement of much higher reforms and outcomes, and they're the sort of reforms that this legislation is endeavouring to provide. After the Labor government got into extensive privatisation and selling of state assets during Mr Cosgrove's watch, then we got into a situation where privatisation was an attempt to instill market forces and also dropping transaction costs across the public service. Now, this legislation that we have in front of us now is an omnibus bill. It means it might be 120 pages, but it is amending a range of legislation. And why are we wanting to do it? Because we're wanting to follow the example set by Mr Ryle, and we want to deliver better services to New Zealanders. That was a very clear national government priority at the last election. And this bill amends the State Services Act, the Public Finance Act, the Crown Entities Act, and what we're trying to do is to give legislation in a way that will allow us to give more legislative grunt to deliver better public services. And I think that the amendments will create a range of public sector management tools, yes, enabling the Prime Minister to give direction to the chair of the State Services Commission, because that will foster an innovative, efficient public sector that will deliver better identified results for New Zealanders. Now, if we think about the last 5 years of government, the public sector increased under the Labor administration by 30%. By 30%. Particularly, well, you can speak about this, Mr. Cunliffe, but if you think about the expansion of the size of the foreign ministry and embassies created in all sorts of odd places, and the numbers increased exponentially, the aid program increased exponentially, all of this coming out of individual people's pockets. And every time we've tried to improve the quality and efficiency of the public sector, the opposition parties are saying, no, you can't do it. We want to increase the size of the public sector, we want to increase the cost of government, and we want to take more money out of people's pockets. That's what the opposition is wanting to do. So as Mr. Williams, I think his name is, said, we are trying to strengthen the role of the State Services Commissioner, and we're trying to give the Prime Minister, for example, direction to do it, because the public sector must follow the government's direction. Must follow the government's direction. So, Mr. Speaker, I believe this is a very good bill, it's a very sensible bill, and I thoroughly commend it to the House for further consideration.
Mr. Speaker.
I call the honourable member Darian Fenton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And